The other day when I was saying how super ambitious and interesting it looks, and I personally really enjoy games where there's literally right before this moment I said I wonder if there's permadeath these characters, or there's a moment where someone was injured and then the word came up. Playing devil's advocate, what if I'm someone who really likes a scripted character? Why am I going to care about all of these people if I can be anyone and they're not someone that Ubisoft has spent years just writing specifically for them?
There's a very cool answer to that. Every single character is well realized. You can literally play a cinematic with different characters, and they have different personalities in that cinematic. All the little nuances of how they speak their lives, they all come through in the cinematics and the storylines when you play with them. You really get attached to these characters. It's amazing.
That's what's interesting to me with these kind of games. Not to go off on a tangent, you probably know I like talking about these kind of games, but it's always interesting to me how I get more attached to people and I'm kind of telling their story myself. Yeah, I've got a few character attributes. I know they're Game of Thrones. I know she's this older woman from. I was about to name some neighborhood from London, but I don't know.
Camden, that's a good one.
Camden, thank you. So, and then these come up, and I'm like, oh, I remember what I did with her in the game. I remember what he did. And it's always interesting how that kind of storytelling gets me personally more attached to these characters than if they were scripted for me.
So yeah, I mean, the cool thing about Players Anyone and looking into their lives is they create these tiny anecdotes. I have a great one. I was playing before coming here, and I had a character that was an identity thief. And then the contact list, they had another identity thief, and I'm like, oh, who's the real guy? Who's stealing from who here, right? So I went into a full sidetrack of figuring out which person was the real person and who was the identity thief. So there's very cool little things, even just the systems that you play with, they allow you to do that. You don't see in other games.
But also, I mean, we're watching Helen right now. Fan favorite Helen.
Loves Helen.
How differently are these characters going to play? Because obviously I can see her kind of ambling around a little bit, moving a little bit slower. I imagine not every character is going to move as slowly as Helen.
Well, basically what we wanted to do is represent the range of how you can play fantasy of playing as anyone and what that means. From a grime young street kid to a grandma, we just kind of said, exposing Helen was clearly give the players an idea of the range of all the different personas and archetypes that you can play with in all of these characters.
Let's talk a little bit about London itself. So Ubisoft has this pedigree of really going into town on its research when it comes to replicating real life places. I mean,
I thought that was a pun, sorry.
It was. I was hoping to slide it out there. In terms of things like, Paris for Assassin's Creed Unity, and of course London has been visited in Assassin's Creed Syndicate. Were you in communication with the Syndicate team? Basically got the map down. It needs some tweaks, but what was the research process like?
So in Ubisoft, obviously the teams talk together a lot. There's a lot of learning, a lot of history that we can pick up from each other, but obviously a modern London is very different from a classic historical. So, we had to go back to the drawing board. We had to assess all the different neighborhoods. What is crime like there? What kind of gangs is there? What is the culture like? Is there any cool local flavor or businesses that exist in that area? We do all this research even before we set foot or even decide to build the city. Once we have all of that, we have this big library of information. We fly down there, we spend a lot of time in the city absorbing the culture, taking pictures, and that's the base of how we build the world in Ubisoft.
So what are the limits around London? What boroughs are we going to expect? So we've seen Camden here, we saw sort of around Westminster earlier. We saw is that Thomas's Dock? The boats?
Yes, so basically we have...
there. That's a pub.
Of course you know London based on culture.
Yeah.
So basically we have up to Tower Hamlets East, we have up to Buckingham Palace in the west, we go south as Brixton, and obviously as north as Camden and Shoreditch.
Can I control the Queen?
The Queen is nowhere to be seen in Watchdogs Legion. It's part of our backstory world narrative.
Did the Play As Anyone system create problems when you were building this version of London?
Play As Anyone is hugely ambitious, and all the systems that come into play, obviously it's like something we've never seen before. But it's allowed us to do some amazing things. The things we see it do and the anecdotes we get from players and ourselves when we interact with the systems have been breathtaking.
When it comes to, so here we can see that, they're talking about human trafficking.
Yes.
Watch Dogs 2 had a very a lighter tone. You had this lovable band of misfits getting together. What's the tone of Watchdogs Legion?
So we wanted to kind of realize the oppressive state of the authoritarian regime and what that meant, but also, British people, they have a great sense of humor. They love their sarcasm. So we couldn't just leave it at that. So we wanted to kind of spice it up. As you see in the walkthrough there, we have Bagley, our AI assistant, who had some lovely dots of humor into the action. So, balancing the British humor with, the authoritarian tone, and that was our aim.
Are we going to get some good sort of fashioned London slang in there?
There's little bits and pieces, yeah, she'll recognize them.
But I do wonder, I often wonder, because I moved here a few months ago, sometimes I'll say things that don't translate to an American audience. Is that something you have to be aware of? Is that British people have a very, very particular style of humor?
I always struggle with saying chips.
Yeah.
I always get it wrong. I don't say fries, I say chips, and there's always trunk and hood and car. So there's a little bits of elements, and I think representing that slang, representing the local culture, it's very important to make the game feel like it's based and cemented in London.
When we saw the demo the other day during the Ubisoft press conference, it ended with that cutscene between two of those characters. Was that the result of Ubisoft knowing which two characters would end the presentation, or will I see that when playing the game?
So actually, in any cinematic, it can be dynamic depending on who you play. We do have the villains, the bad guys in our stories. You will interact with those guys, but watching any character, literally any character you can find in the world starring in your cinematics, and then watching the narrative flourish come through based on the type of personality that they have, that for me is what really changes cinematics and watching.
I mentioned it earlier, and it does feel like, especially with the way you can see everybody's information there out in public, that felt like a natural evolution. But the fact that you are jumping into different people in this series that thematically is about surveillance and how no one has privacy, it feels like Watchdogs Legion is almost what I wanted Watchdogs to be all along in the past 2 games now. I don't know if that was this feeling on the dev side of things, like, oh, this is what we've been wanting to make. I kind of asked earlier if it arose out of development, but does the dev team feel like, oh, this is what we've been trying to nail for X amount of years now?
It was always in discussion, and we always chose to go into different places. But the goal this time around was to literally say we want everything that we see when we profile someone to be real. Their jobs, what they do. Characters will even change clothes. Then when they leave work, they'll change their clothes into different outfits. It's making sure that everything that you read, it means something, it attaches to their trade, and says something about what they do in the world. And then that breathes life into the character when you recruit them. When you play as them, you really feel attached to them.
So whenever I recruit someone, I have to kick off a kind of origin mission. Is that for every single person, or just some key figures?
So basically, every single person in the world has how much they like DedSec. Some of them not so much, some of them are huge fans. So the goal is you have to convince them to join the cause. So what you do is, you look into their lives, you analyze what problems they might have, you go fix it for them, and that kind of warms them up to DedSec. Then at that point, you can kind of trigger an origin story, and then they join your team. It's pretty cool.
I'm curious, I don't know how accurate or how honest of an answer you can get, but does the ambition and size of this game kind of scare you from the dev side?
The most important thing for us is that we put it on the floor today for people to see and watch our guys play. People are spending a lot of time with it, and that's real. It literally works like that right now. There's no smoke and mirrors. What you're seeing is what the game is doing. When we had this thing running, when we had all the technology working, and when all the pieces slotted together, it was an inspiring thing to see.
It was such an exciting game. It's funny, I think maybe it's just the cynic in me, I'm looking for the spot where I'm like, oh, that's the catch, or that's the caveat. So far I have not found it, but I'm saying it almost seems like, why aren't more people doing something like this with prototypes? There are smaller studios doing it on a smaller scale, like State of Decay does something similar, but on a much, much smaller scale. But to see a big Ubisoft studio doing it, I still feel like I'm waiting for oh, I get it, that's the smoke and mirror you mentioned.
So, it was a core driver for us. From very early on, we looked at that and said, that's exactly what we want to do. So when you orientate a very large team around it from early days and spend years on this kind of technology, you put a lot of effort into it, but it's focused, right? And that's how you break down these barriers, these technological difficulties that, have been very, not easy to span to this point. And that's how we managed to literally build something so special that we can literally deliver you what we're showing.
Thank you so much for joining us and talking to us about Watchdogs Legion. When can people play it?
So right now we have a theater demo that they can come see in our booth and see it play live for them. And the game is out on March 6, 2020.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. It was a pleasure.